Welcome to The Sideshow.
Well, welcome to another edition of The Sideshow. And we are continuing with our special focus this week on Peter Gabriel. We still have Sven with us. We've brought on some firepower for the discussions of Peter Gabriel. And we've already knocked down Peter Gabriel 3, Melt. We're now going to continue on. Mike is going to be leading the charge on yet another Peter Gabriel album. So, Mike, why don't you let the audience know what our next pick is?
Thanks, Mark. Well, I'm going to talk about the first side one of the album that was released after Peter Gabriel's third solo album, known as Melt. And it was also titled just Peter Gabriel. In England. And because of the fact that Peter Gabriel had released 3 solo albums prior to his fourth, all of which had been called Peter Gabriel, when his fourth solo album was released in the United States, it was given the title Security. And while that decision may have been made by the record company before Peter Gabriel signed off on it, ultimately he didn't get too perturbed about it, and so it came. What I always knew the album because I was living in the United States when it was released, and it was called Security, and so that's always what I called it. But it came after his third album, which was released in 1980. It was released in 1982. And, for those that listened to our podcast with Sven on Melt, the third solo album, a lot of the things that were said about that album kind of apply to this one as well. The main one being that Peter Gabriel was doing his songwriting. I mean, the process that he used to create this music, like the previous album, was he started with rhythm tracks rather than chord progressions. And if anything, sort of expanded the, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, the artiness of what he was doing. I mean, I think that many would consider this album even a little more experimental in terms of what Peter Gabriel was doing than the third album, which was relatively revolutionary, and for some of the reasons that were that made known during our previous discussion were just as applicable here. Although there was Peter Gabriel's biggest radio hit up until that time came off of this fourth solo album, Shock the Monkey, which is on side 2 of this album. We're going to be talking about side 1. And the Peter Gabriel's, we did a fair amount of discussing Peter Gabriel's time with Genesis and what he was doing over the course of time where he recorded his first 3 solo albums. As I said a minute ago, kind of continued the process here. And in my opinion, the artistic high point of Peter Gabriel's career were these 2 albums, Peter Gabriel 3, Melt, and his fourth solo album known as Security. Now he was going to go on in 1985, when he released his album So, which was just a massive popular success and a critical success for the most part. Had hits such as Sledgehammer, Big Time, In Your Eyes. I mean, songs that were just massively popular. In Your Eyes was sort of the cornerstone of a Cameron Crowe film, Say Anything, for example. Sledgehammer became known as kind of the quintessential MTV video. Big Time got, AM radio airplay, and other songs as well. Red Rain and That Voice Again, for example. It became ubiquitous on the radio.
Yeah.
And after that, Peter Gabriel was just, he was a major, a Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan level artist,
Yeah.
popularly speaking, internationally known, etc. When I saw Peter Gabriel perform live, the only time I ever saw him perform was on his tour following the So album. That was in 1987 at the Marcus Amphitheater in Milwaukee. One of the best concerts I ever saw. Fabulous performance, great music, etc., etc., etc. And over the course of this time, between the release of this album and Peter Gabriel's larger success and on into the future, he really was expanding his breadth as an artist generally. He started what was known as the WOMAD Festival, which I believe it started in 1982, around the time that this album was released, which is World of Music, Art, and Dance, I believe is what the WOMAD acronym stands for. Eventually, and this I think wasn't until after So was released, but he started what's called Real World Records. And he just became someone who was known not just for his work as a musician, but also as just a concerned citizen of the world. World music was something that he started to focus on. Just he kind of put his foot in the water with his third solo album. He was in hip deep by the time of this album,
Mm-hmm.
And he continued in that vein and became just sort of an international personality who was known as having more on his mind than just cranking out music. The sort of guy that would have, performed at an Amnesty International
Mm-hmm.
performance. I mean, that's, apartheid and, South African political issues were something that was going on in the 1980s. And with songs like Biko from the third album and other things that he was doing thereafter. And eventually, he didn't release another album after So until, well, it was the early 90s when he released Us.
Yeah, the amount of time between albums has grown exponentially.
Yeah.
It was 1977, 1978, 1980, 1982 for Security, 1986 for So, 1992 for Us,
Mm-hmm.
2002 for Up, and 2023 for I.O. Now, there are certainly other projects that are less singer-songwriter oriented in there. He certainly
Soundtracks
made
and
a
that
mark
kind of stuff,
composing film scores. The film score for the movie Birdie is a combination. It reuses a lot of material from 3 and Security.
Mm-hmm.
But then the soundtrack the score he composed for the film Last Temptation of Christ is quite a piece of work. I would recommend that highly. In fact, in our previous episode, I was talking about music that I would introduce to normal people. Well, the soundtrack, the score to that film is strange. There is a sonic palette that is unfamiliar to Western ear. But at the same time, I have had some success by telling people to check out a different drum from that album, or It Is Accomplished from that album. Those are like earworms from another planet. That's how I would describe that.
Well, and it's a good point that you make, Sven. One of the things that Peter Gabriel started to do around the time of the release of this album, his fourth solo album, Security, was soundtrack work. And the Birdie, I guess I would encourage people to watch both the films that have been referred to here, both Birdie and The Last Temptation of Christ. And the soundtracks are very different from each other. Whereas the Birdie soundtrack, and Birdie is a very interesting film. It's an Alan Parker directed film, and it stars Matthew Modine and Nicolas Cage in one of Nicolas Cage's earlier film roles, and Matthew Modine's for that matter. And it really uses sort of instrumental versions of some of the songs on this album, Security. I mean, particularly Rhythm of the Heat and Wallflower. Wallflower is on side two, but a very good use of that of the music sans lyrics for that film, and it's a little bit more accessible. The music itself, if you've got the soundtrack recording for Birdie, for example, it's a little more accessible than the material on Passion, which is the name of the album that was released that contains the soundtrack material from the Last Temptation of Christ, and the tracks you mentioned are relatively accessible. Some of the material on Passion is better suited to background music in a film than music just to listen to, but an excellent job of creating a soundtrack for that film, and one of the significant things about recording the Birdie soundtrack was, I believe that is when Peter Gabriel first became associated with Daniel Lanois, who is a musician in his own right, but also known primarily as a producer. I think his biggest claim to fame is probably the U2 album, starting with Unforgettable Fire, Joshua Tree, and Achtung Baby. He's also worked with Bob Dylan on like Oh Mercy and Time Out of Mind, a very well-regarded producer. And Daniel Lanois was involved in the production of So, which turned out to be Peter Gabriel's commercial high point. I'm not aware whether Daniel Lanois was involved with Passion or not, but
he wasn't us.
It doesn't, and that makes sense to me. Just thinking of the sounds of those records in my mind as we talk, but that's an example of Peter Gabriel was just sort of expanding the breadth of the work that he was doing during the 80s, starting in the early 80s and going through into the early 90s. He was just doing all this different stuff, and turning himself into something beyond just a recording artist. I guess the reason I'm taking the time to touch on these things is I believe that he just did not want to be bound by the strictures of sort of rock and roll recording artist, that he never really had allowed himself to be restrained into, but he just was expanding at a rate that was, I think, unique among the average musical recording artist, during the era that some of this music we're talking about was created. What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think, first of all, I think there's a couple things that hold true if you look at all of Peter Gabriel's music. I think there was some themes that go way back to before he was in any bands or whatever. There was some very strong spiritual type of influences on him. He says the first music he listened to was hymns, right? As kind of the foundation for what he was doing. Now, I listened to a lot of Peter Gabriel's music, including music on this album, and religious hymns is not what comes to mind, right? However, there is just a continual theme of let's say religious or spiritual tones that pops up throughout his career. We just talked about this, Passion and the Last Temptation of Christ. I would think that it demands a certain amount of spirituality to try to put music to what was happening there. Heck, the name of the band Genesis. There's all these different things that kind of pop up. This is, and then that desire to go out and seek out world music. And I think we're going to be talking today about some of the tribal spirituality that he encountered on some of those explorations. So I think a lot of that goes way back to his earlier roots on what he wanted to do and the types of things that he had in his head that he wanted to get out there to the world. And he also along the way, especially later on, put out some very conventional and very popular hits. But deep in there, you hear a lot of this experimentation, and I think a lot of that goes way back to I wouldn't say it was a religious, I'd say it was more of a spiritual type of thing that was with him from day one of the musics that we've heard from him.
Well, and when you talk about singing hymns, some people will say, well, what's the difference between being religious and being spiritual? And I think it's different religions have different doctrine, different dogma, etc. But singing hymns, it's like you've got a group of people who are together, and they're singing. They're not talking. They're singing together in just a common, unified form of expression that's directed towards their spiritual faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that can be common to any particular religion or the rituals or practices that a variety of different religions engage in, whether it's prayer, worship, or other forms of religious ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ritual is kind of a good word to that Peter Gabriel uses, and it's certainly not used by Peter Gabriel in any kind of pejorative sense. It's an act that multiple people engage in together as part of a community.
Mm-hmm.
And world music, you mentioned, Mark, world music. I think that's a good term to throw out there in terms of the ways in which Peter Gabriel was expanding what he was doing on this album. He was even more world music elements and looking at different cultural scenarios for the source of where he was coming from in composing these songs.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to tee off briefly on what Mark was saying about the religious and spiritual aspect of the music. It's not a song. It's not a song from this album, but on the next album, and we mentioned it earlier, the song "In Your Eyes" is a song that is written in an African tradition where it is intended that the same lyrics expressing a sentiment of love could be used to express love of man to woman or man to God. That song is written with that intention to be equally applicable in either context. So yeah, there's definitely a strong spiritual context to the music that he's doing.
And there's also clearly some conflict that is really present. Starting from even his musical career. First of all, I always find it kind of interesting. When you take a look at the band Genesis, with the exception of Phil Collins, the rest of those guys, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, these guys all went to high school together. Just the fact that they all happened to be in the same school at the same time. This wasn't some kind of super group put together from after they'd established themselves. They knew each other before they knew how to play music. I always find that kind of fascinating when you have these people that grew up together. But there was clearly some conflict within the band. It's why Peter Gabriel left the band. It's not that he had. Phil Collins played on his albums. It's not like they severed their ties with these people. He just couldn't get what he wanted to musically done as a part of that band, and or theatrically done, however he wanted to do it. So he was certainly willing to personally endure conflict while trying clearly globally to try to de-escalate conflict. When you look at some of the causes that he had and things that he was involved with, he certainly had no problem with engaging in personal conflict. And I think some of that conflict we hear in the edginess to his songs, or even the topics of the songs that we have, because it's conflict is human, and let's celebrate some of that in our music.
Well, and the inability to resolve conflict in a way that is not unhealthy to one or more of the people in conflict is sort of it's like, look, there is going to be conflict, says Peter Gabriel, between the lines. And, we're either going, so there is going to be conflict. We need to resolve conflict in a way that is not unhealthy is healthy for the most people possible and unhealthy for the fewest people possible, as opposed to exploiting conflict, or looking at conquest as the only acceptable or effective means of resolving conflict. And that spirit, so to speak, permeates, I think, the whole ethos of where Peter Gabriel is coming from, in songs such as Games Without Frontiers, more explicitly, and others between the lines.
So I just think it's interesting, kind of the types of conversation that we're having here, going into some kind of deep topics and whatever. It just kind of shows the music that we're going to be listening to here. This is not just fluffy pop music. There is some depth, some emotion, some agitation that comes with this music, and it's interesting, that how he pushed very hard to continue to be able to do this.
And I think it's a lot of the music that we talk about is just, it's a little bit more straightforward. It's a little bit more for entertainment, or just getting people up on their feet, rocking and rolling, having a good time, being able to spill beer on your shoes and not worry about it, which is a legitimate purpose of rock and roll, among other things. But I like to characterize Peter Gabriel as an artist more so than just a straight musician, because there's so much art involved in his creative process and the finished product when he's produced. We did a podcast recently, Mark and I, about Patti Smith's debut album, and I think it was Mark that kind of happened upon it. It's that, like, look, she is an artist, first and foremost, and musician is just sort of a subcomponent of that greater role. And I think that same kind of assessment really applies to Peter Gabriel. And so the finished product that you're going to get for someone who goes out with that stated intention is going to be more complex and more arty and have more significance if you're interested. Which is not to say that just simply listening to the music and enjoying it is not a sufficient basis to sit down and listen to anything, whether it's Peter Gabriel or any other music. What do you think, Sven?
Well, it's funny. The other day I was listening to your ZZ Top show, and you were talking about the song, what is it, Tube Steak Boogie. and I was thinking, hey, wait a minute, Peter Gabriel would never record Tube Steak Boogie. And then I thought, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of exactly what Sledgehammer is.
When I saw him perform in Milwaukee in 1987, one of the songs that he performed was "Big Time" off of "So." And I'll tell you, seeing that live with Tony Levin playing bass, the studio recording is just a shell of the full blown performance that they were able to put down that night.
Was he playing with drumsticks taped to his fingers?
No, he was not. Although I have seen him with King Crimson perform using that method. But in any case, the reason I bring it up is that at the end of that song, the lyrics are, "And the bulge in my big, big, big." Well, as Peter Gabriel was standing on the stage, when he recited that line, and he had his hand down at his crotch, and with each big, he was holding his hand out, measuring the length that was getting bigger. So he didn't soft pedal the fact that he was, that the song was sort of a snide take on someone who was in their own mind watching the length of their penis extend as they hit the big time.
Hey, it sells. It sells. You got to get some, obviously.
But no, he was. I mean, he was a person who understood, though, that music exists at a basic level, and different kinds of music do different things, and while and I have no trouble singing the praises of music by ZZ Top, because when I'm in the right mood, there's few things that can scratch that same itch that ZZ Top can. Mm-hmm. And while I would characterize Peter Gabriel's music as being far more complex, far more subtle, far more nuanced, and if I'm going to call a spade, superior to the music created by ZZ Top, it doesn't delegitimize or change the fact that when I'm in the right mood, I fucking love ZZ Top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For lack of a better way of putting it. So it's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's good stuff for if you like music. It's good stuff if you have concerns about sociology, psychology, anthropology, or just world affairs in general, along with, like I say, just getting into the sound, because there is some intense just sound on this album, and especially on side one that we're going to be talking about shortly, and perhaps right now is the time to start talking about the subject of our podcast, and
let's dive in.
And I've got a copy of the album cover here. As you see, it just says Peter Gabriel in the same lettering as the previous album up in the corner. I don't know what the heck that's a picture of. Whether it's it looks like a tribal mask of some kind.
I think it's a picture of Peter Gabriel himself that's distorted through a bunch of different things. There's an interesting story behind that. They didn't use hypnosis for this.
My understanding is that it is a tribal mask, but distorted through. Is it a photo of the mask from a TV screen or something like that?
Yeah, it's weird.
It whatever the effect is, and on the back of the album, there's sort of it's a much more indistinct image of the front cover. And then there are two images that looks like Peter Gabriel, and he is biting on a tube as if he is undergoing electric shock treatment. That's how I see those photographs. Mm-hmm. And then it lists the tracks. It lists the tracks on the album as well. As was already indicated earlier, I mean, this album came out in 1982, and Peter Gabriel was still. I was aware of him because I'd heard material off of the third solo album. And so when it came out, I was aware of it. And I can remember hearing it at it wasn't really, I wouldn't call it a party, but a group of people were hanging out at someone's house and there was music playing. And I thought, what is this? Because it sounded, I didn't know what it was. And it sounded it was unlike anything I'd heard. Oh, this is Peter Gabriel's new album. I hadn't heard Shock the Monkey yet on the radio. And so eventually I gotta check out this guy, or I gotta check out more from this guy, because I had not become the Peter Gabriel fan by that point that I eventually became, later in the 80s. Mark, I mean, you would have been in Germany with in the service when this came out. I mean, was this on your radar screen at that time?
No, not at the time. The album wasn't on my screen at the time. I said, the single was, but the album itself, I didn't actually start listening to this album until we were rooming together in Madison. Okay. To actually hear the whole album. Just the singles were more driving my knowledge of Peter Gabriel throughout this whole time before I started actually listening to the albums. So it was you that introduced me to the album content here.
So no, and Sven, let me throw a dartboard. Let me throw a dart at the board here. In 1982, you were 5 years old.
Sounds right.
Okay.
I was not listening to this album at that time.
Okay. Okay.
I was
Okay.
listening to Sesame Street records.
All right. Well, hey, man. It's never too late. But in any case, there was a show on television back in those days that was very popular. I saw it a couple of times, but I did not watch it regularly. That wasn't really what the wavelength I was on at that time. But the show was called Miami Vice, and the first song on side one of this album, Security, is called "The Rhythm of the Heat," and this song appeared on television as on a Miami Vice episode as part of the soundtrack. And we'll play a couple of clips from this song, but just as an intro to the song, Peter Gabriel, or I've read somewhere on the internet that what Peter Gabriel was inspired by in writing this song was some writing by the psychologist Carl Jung, who described while traveling in Kenya, he had observed some tribesmen engaged in a ceremony involving drumming and various other ceremonial activities, and he found himself getting caught up in what he was seeing in a way that he just took note of, that just being there and watching, it sort of was drawing him in a way that he was not necessarily entirely comfortable with, even though he found it fascinating and engaging and compelling. And so this is and there's a sort of African tribesman is sort of the backdrop for this song. But Sven, what do you have anything to add to that as far as the basics background for this song?
Yeah, that's certainly where the song comes from. That Carl Jung, he in witnessing these tribal rituals, felt a loss of individual identity. He felt himself being absorbed into this communal experience, and felt himself losing the degree of control that he likes to exercise over himself while participating in this. And to some, while I definitely don't think that some of the character studies on Peter Gabriel 3 are autobiographical, I kind of wonder, to what degree might Gabriel be identifying with, as he is exploring deeper and deeper into these more visceral forms of music, whether he's identifying with the experience that Jung had in sort of, he's this upper crust Brit in Gabriel's case, exploring these very different kinds of music. To what degree did he have the same journey that Jung had?
It's kind of profound when you think about the impact that rituals, and I think we're going to talk a lot about rituals over the next few songs, but that notion that it's not just about observing them, but if you're paying attention, if you're a part of them, they can impact you even if you don't understand what's happening. I mean, that's the power of the ritual. Now, I think this is that is what this explores. I can't help thinking though that Peter Gabriel didn't watch My Dinner with Andre, and that scene in the middle of that, and which came out, about when he would have been writing this song, right? And there's a very interesting description of someone observing and partaking in a native ritual that is a pretty intense part of that movie as well. But stepping back from that's more humorous. I mean, I think it's a real thing that it impacts people that go to these rituals they don't necessarily understand, but they end up getting wrapped up in them.
let's listen to a clip from sort of the first part of this track, and then we can continue this discussion on the other side.
The land here is strong, strong beneath my feet. It feeds on the blood, it feeds on the heat. The rhythm is below me, the rhythm of the heat. The rhythm is around me, the rhythm has control. The rhythm is inside me, the rhythm has my soul. Drawn across the plain land to the place that is higher. Drawn into the circle that dances round the fire. We spit into our hands and breathe across the ponds, raising them up high, held open to the sun. Drawn across the plain land to the place that is higher. Drawn into the circle that dances.
All right. Well, there's kind of the first, real substance of the song. And one thing that's worth pointing out is that, the clip that we just played here, that starts about a minute into the song. And because one of the things that Peter Gabriel does very effectively in his music is he kind of sets the tone. And sometimes that involves a very slow arising of the motif that's gonna basically be the song. And so I didn't want to have our listener just sit there for a minute of sort of slowly building atmosphere. But that is something that when you listen to this side, and this isn't, you don't get shortchanged on this side in terms of length, but there's only 4 tracks.
Yeah.
And so they're of sufficient length where you get your money's worth. But so there was a kind of a slow build up to the tension of the song, and then the song continues to build. You hear that drawn across the plain land to the place that is higher, and it really starts to capture that feeling of being drawn up into something.
Yeah.
That we were discussing earlier about not just Carl Jung's experience, but also probably Peter Gabriel's own experience in creating what is not just an individual experience, but a group experience. And you go to I used to go to a Grateful Dead concert, and the members of the Grateful Dead used to talk about the idea of group mind as what they were trying to create. And there's certainly, you go to a Grateful Dead concert, and it's relatively easy in that situation because everybody has, or not everybody, but most everybody has sort of drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and finds it easier to kind of all think along the same lines. But you have this feeling of the music starts and everyone is getting into the same rhythm and everyone's getting on the same wavelength and everyone's kind of getting drawn into the same thing. Now that's just more of a benign, I think, a more benign, let's party and dance and feel good for a couple hours. Whereas sort of the spiritual aspect of the African rituals that are, sort of the inspiration for this song. But you already in this, in this first clip of the song, feel music that's kind of building and inviting you to sort of jump in and become a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that is an interesting point about, the notion of building from very quiet, to your point, when this was played on an album, you would sometimes worry if you'd gotten the album, actually onto the song, and it wasn't just tricking the beginning. Patience in as the song, comes into hearing and then builds up, and then becomes something that's very, auditory in everything that's going on. A very clear impression of the world music and the drumming that is such an important part of world music, and quite frankly, which is such an important part of most of Peter Gabriel's music in bringing this in. And just an auditory, spatial experience listening to this song.
One thing I would add is just, and this is as good a place as any to put it in, because this is one of the more world music influenced tracks on the album. Kind of a term that is used nowadays. I don't think it was used so much in the early '80s. Was cultural appropriation, of using the music of other cultures and incorporating it into your art. Mm-hmm. But I watched contemporaneous interviews with Peter Gabriel dating back to 1982 at the time of this record, and he very clearly uses the word "I am stealing." I am stealing rhythms from other places, and with that, it is my intention to break out of the standard rock format that we would find in Europe and America. I want to be exploring some additional colors, and I'll steal to do it.
Yeah. Well, and in this album in some ways was not unlike, for example, Paul Simon's Graceland is what I was thinking about. An album where Paul Simon specifically set out to expose American listeners or just other listeners to South African forms of music, and more like pop music. The kind of music that would be played, that real people would play for each other, and whatnot. And while this is not, that wasn't necessarily Peter Gabriel's purpose, and I don't think that's what he set out to do. He was, as you say, Sven, he was using these types of music to help himself expand his own artistic and musical palette. But I think that the effect was similar, that, like, who's playing drums on that? And just sort of generated, for me it's true, some interest in world music. Now, I didn't start out in going buying albums left and right of so-called world music, but things like Talking Heads' Remain in Light, for example. These were where Western or European or American artists were utilizing world music, African rhythms and whatnot to very good effect. And Peter Gabriel was just using it in taking it not so much putting it into a different context, but just taking it as it was and making it part of his own music. And the second clip, which showcases the highlight of this song and was used very effectively in the movie Birdie, in its soundtrack, and it just really shows just how much African music was being stolen here. So let's listen to this and finish up on this song on the other side.
Sounds good.
Smash the radio. Smash the watch. Smash the camera. The rhythm is around me. The rhythm has control. The rhythm is inside me. The rhythm has my soul.
All right. Well, that is the kind of the conclusion of Rhythm of the Heat, and in we I always listen to the material that we're going to talk about in preparation for our podcast. And last night, my wife is out of town, as it so happens, and so I was just sitting out in our family room where we have a surround sound speaker set up with clipped speakers and a 725-watt amplifier. And I plugged this through the surround. And for this song, I cranked it up to about 50. And were it not for the frailties that accompany a 62-year-old person such as myself, I would have been up on my feet dancing around. I mean, just a very powerful performance in a genre of music that let me walk that back. When you think of like rock and roll music, and especially live rock and roll music, drum solos are something that's fairly common, and a lot of times that's the time when you decide to go hit the bathroom and get back before the real music starts. But this is an example where the drums are the music. And you can definitely sense what Carl Jung was trying to say when he said you just feel like, regardless of whether you want to or not, you're drawn into the intensity of what is happening here. And I think that's certainly the case with this portion of this track.
Yeah, really interesting, a really interesting song, and it does. I mean, we talked about building, and I mean, it builds. It gets to a peak that is very, pushing, driving, pounding, whatever you want to call it. If from relaxing and trying to hear if the song is starting to wanting to jump up and down is a pretty big transition, and they do it here.
In 2016, I saw again at the Summerfest grounds, a co-headlining tour with Peter Gabriel and Sting, and "Rhythm of the Heat" was the opening song to that show, and they were co-headlining, but they were not. It was not one went first and then did their full set and then the other did their set. They were alternating songs within the set. And so it went from this song, "Rhythm of the Heat," to Sting doing "If I Ever Lose My Faith in You," and it was the kind of change in pressure that you might get the bends from.
Well, they did not. Peter Gabriel did not perform "Rhythm of the Heat" when I saw him in 1987, but I would assume that that he had a good set of drummers for purposes of the performance that you saw.
And he was able to use drums from both artists' bands. There was not a clear line that this is my band, this is your band. There was a fluidity between Sting's backing band and Gabriel's.
Sounds interesting.
Well, whatever one thinks about Peter Gabriel or this kind of music or world music, one thing it ain't is boring.
Yeah.
Because that if that kind of drumming can't get your blood pumping, well, I guess I don't understand. Moving on to the next track, which is called San Jacinto, and as it so happens, this was the opening song that was performed when I saw Peter Gabriel at the Marcus Amphitheater in 1987. And it's one of my favorite Peter Gabriel tracks. It's a very interesting, complex, very spiritual song in my estimation. And it comes from a Native American, the Native American spirituality is the basis for the lyrics to this song. And is basically describing a Native American, and makes reference in the very beginning of the thick cloud steam rising, hissing stone on sweat lodge fire. Starts out a Native American spirituality, and eventually addresses the Native American culture confronting and its spirituality confronting sort of the consumerism of the modern world that was in existence, at the time that Peter Gabriel was creating this music, in a way that I think is very respectful of the underlying culture that is being addressed in the song. And unless before we can play a clip of the beginning of the song here, does anyone have anything to add before we press on?
No, why don't we hear the song, and
All
then we can put some thoughts.
We got a
up
few
there.
tracks for this one, and let's hear the first one and continue after.
Something moving, tasted in my mouth and in my heart. It feels like dying slow, letting go of life. Medicine man, lead me up through town, Indian ground, so far down. Caught up and each house a fool, kids wearing water wings, drinking cool.
All right. Well, now that track covers sort of the end of the first verse, some chants that occur in between, and then the beginning of the second verse to kind of give you a flavor. The first verse touching primarily upon the Native Americans' spiritual feelings, and the second verse starts to talk about the Native American sort of experiencing, the consumerist aspects of the world in which he's living, and the chant in between, the Haina Wankantanka, I may be mispronouncing that, but that's a chant that comes from the Lakota language, and literally means great spirit or great mystery, and is the kind of the spiritual focus of the singer's culture, and makes some fairly snide comments in the second verse about the nature of the culture that is rising up around them as it relates to the lives of the actual Native Americans that the song is talking about.
As I understand the background of what inspired this song, and I don't know if this is back when he was with Genesis or early days as solo artist, but it was at a point where the band was still driving themselves. And during a tour in America, they were checking into a hotel, and the person who was helping them with their bags was an elderly Native American gentleman who, just as an aside, tossed off the fact that my apartment is burning down even as we speak, and they drove him out there to help him rescue whatever he could, but end up having a conversation with this elderly man, and the perspectives that he shared led to the writing of this song.
Interesting.
I mean, it's a complex song, but it kind of goes at the situation in a relatively simple way. You're starting out with, well, here's the person, here's what they're confronting, and how is he going to deal with it? And the second clip, and why don't we just play it and we can talk about it? But it gets to that issue of, well, how is the singer going to respond to this dilemma that he's seeing? How does our culture and spirituality fit into this modern world that is rising up all around us? And we can continue after.
Okay.
Way above us, the desert snow, white wind blows. I hold the line of strength that pulls me through the field. Jacinto, I hold the line. Jacinto, the poison light, the darkness to my sight. I hold the line, and the tears roll down my swollen cheek. Think I'm losing it, getting weaker. I hold the line. I hold the line. Jacinto, yellow eagle flies down from the sun. From the sun.
All right, what is he going to do? He's going to hold the line, or at least he's going to try. And I don't necessarily know the specific significance of the San Jacinto, whether that's a place or a person or whatnot. I mean, it kind of it evokes sort of the southwestern United States and that sort of landscape. But it's, I hold the line of strength that pulls me through the fear. And it appears that he's going to go about doing that by just continuing, to the extent possible, to live life as he always had, and remain true to himself. But he's not necessarily confident, because as the tears roll down my swollen cheek, think I'm losing it, getting weaker, but not defeated. And I'll tell you this, and this song is about 7 minutes long, 6-7 minutes long. And it was just a very powerful opener for a show. And when they get to that part, I hold the line, it was loud. And this was 1987, so this is nearly 40 years ago. So, my memory may be flawed, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that my friends and I had ingested some hallucinogenic chemicals before we went to the concert.
Maybe would have brought you right in line with the culture. I think that this song does a really good job, again, of building. There's a building in this song, because as we hear the beginning of the song, there's almost when I first hear it, it almost sounds like Oriental chimes, but it's more geared on clearly on Native American culture, and even the way the lyrics start. He just kind of takes little elements of the culture: thick cloud, steam rising, buffalo robe, just all these different pieces that makes it clear he's bringing pieces together from the Native American culture to kind of set the stage, and then begins more, storytelling and ultimately to the ultimate goal or strategy of holding the line. So, just interesting storytelling. And again, it's almost like stream of consciousness of the things that he was thinking of as he was putting his thoughts together for for this song. And then musically, yes, a great building to a little more power than it starts with.
And I certainly there's nothing lyrically to suggest that that the song is about, a peyote ritual or anything like that. Although that was a part of the Native American culture in the Southwest. But whether you want to call it that or a vision quest or walkabout, it's definitely a spiritual, quasi mystical journey that the singer is going on, in coming to terms with what they're observing around them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what they're observing is rendered in a way that's poetic and alludes to that sort of internal experience. And the third clip, and we can finish up our discussion of the song on the other end. But the last clip, because there's a coda to this song where the music changes, and it's a fairly barren, bleak sounding, and the reason why I alluded to the peyote ritual or the vision quest is because when the journey ends or the drugs wear off, or whatever, when you come to the end of whatever this process is, it's Monday morning and you have to press on. And I think that this is really what the end of this song signifies. Why don't we listen to it and then we can conclude our discussion on the other side.
We will walk on the land. We will breathe of the air. We will drink from the stream. We will live, hold the line.
All right. Well, you can certainly tell the difference in just the sound, the music behind the vocals, and it's sort of not. It doesn't sound confident, but it doesn't sound defeated. It sounds determined. We will live. We'll walk of the land. We will breathe of the air. We will drink from the stream. We will live and hold the line. But the impression that I got was that this was the person after they had completed, whether it's the vision quest or whatever, that this was their kind of concluding realization. That's what I think. Anyone got a different opinion?
I always I thought this was a person at the end of his life. I think I'm losing it, getting weaker. That's kind of what I thought.
Well, I mean, and
I see if you can see someone in the American indie existence, potentially not that their life is coming to an end, but their lifestyle and their culture is coming to an end. If you look at what the concluding lines were, right? It's like, we will walk, we will breathe, we will drink, we will live. Someone that's making that type of pronouncement, that would indicate that those things were in doubt, that they would be able to walk, that they would be able to breathe, they would be able to drink. So, I mean, I could clearly see how that notion of end of life is there. I think that they may be staring at the end of their existence and their culture, and then this is a kind of a rally to drive on and hold the line as they move forward. That's kind of what I appear, kind of the larger American indie existence.
Well,
but it certainly fits with the narrative that things are coming to an end.
Well, there's a literary reference that kind of ties in with what Sven said. I mean, the Jack London story, The Law of Life, which is basically a story told from the perspective of an elderly Eskimo who's basically been left by the fire, and the rest of his tribe, his group, leaves because he's gotten to the point where he's more of a burden than an assistance, and it's sort of like, you've lived a good life, you've provided for us, and now we are going to be able to continue, and goodbye. and
hope the fire lasts a while.
I mean, that's kind of what it's about, and the story is told from the perspective of the, where is it, old Kashkush? I can't remember, but it's and that's consistent with what Sven is talking about. Now, I would tend to agree with you that the lyrics suggest, prevailing and continuing on, but the tone is definitely consistent with I've done all that I can do, and the next generation is going to have to ultimately address these issues. There's legitimacy to that.
Yep.
As far as I'm concerned.
Interesting story about sort of the soundscape we hear at the end of the sound, that it almost sounds like winds over a plain. In our prior episode, I talked about how Peter Gabriel was starting to experiment with the Fairlight synthesizer that allowed sampling of real world sounds, and there's some fairly entertaining footage available on YouTube of Peter Gabriel and a few friends walking through a garbage dump, just picking up various objects and recording sounds. There's several unsuccessful attempts to break television screens. It turns out that it takes a little more mustard, than you'd think. But then another item that was captured in the garbage dump was blowing through an old rusty pipe, and that is the sound that is sampled at the end of this song that creates sort of that wind soundscape. That's rusty garbage.
I mean, there you go. I mean, that is, and I would never have been able to figure that out just from listening to the record or to the CD, whatever. But it also explains just the unique, otherworldly. How did they do that? What is it? Where did that come from? And that's just an interesting process. How many artists, in the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, they showed Queen recording in the studio, and they picked up the chocolate milk colored metal wastebasket in the floor of the studio and put the microphone in there, and they were trying to do these creative things. Okay, that's great. There's they were coming up with ways, given what was around them, to make the music. But I'd say this is a little, what you described, Sven, is a little more, that delves a little deeper into the whole idea of how can we create unique sounds and put them on tape or put them on a digital recording medium, which I believe this album was recorded digitally rather than on an analog tape. How can we create the sound that we're going to commit to disc or to tape? And that's a good example of why I consider Peter Gabriel to be a heavyweight in this regard. Is he what the heck, let's check it out, and it provided something for this song, which is, as I said, one of my favorites. So San Jacinto, moving on, the third track on side one of Security is called I Have the Touch. And this is the most conventional of the songs on this album. And why don't we I just got one clip prepared for this album. Why don't we listen to it? It goes from the beginning of the song, and we hear the first couple of minutes, and then we can continue our discussion on the other side.
Let's do it.
The time I like is a rush hour. like it all so much. Such a massive motion. Do not know where it goes. I move with the movement and I have the touch. I'm waiting for ignition. I'm looking for a spark. Any chance collision and I light up in the dark. There you stand before me, all that fur and all that hair. Or do I dare? I have the touch. Wanting contact, I'm wanting contact, I'm wanting contact with you. Shake those hands, shake those hands. Give me the thing I understand. Shake those hands, shake those hands. Take hands, take hands. Any social occasion, it's hello.
All right, now this is a song that is more like a song you'd hear on the radio. This album was produced by Peter Gabriel, and he had a co-producer whose name I don't recall off the top of my head. It wasn't
David Lord.
David Lord.
Yeah.
And someone not as well known as, for example, Steve Lillywhite, who was the producer of the third solo album that we discussed on the last episode. But this song, it almost has that Steve Lillywhite kind of quality to it, and is a little bit lighter in tone and subject matter than I Don't Remember, for example, from the third album. But this is just this is a song that it's easy to understand where he's coming from. I mean, he's involved in the world, and there's there's a million people on the street, and like everyone's trying to get into the subway or the tube or whatever, but nobody's really talking to each other. And so amongst all this humanity, I still need contact.
Yeah.
I need, to have the touch of another person and whatnot. And he does it in a very accessible way. So he's speaking about something that's important and meaningful, but in a pretty straightforward sense, and dare I say it, a more conventional rock song. Even though it still has that undeniable Peter Gabriel signature on it.
Yeah, and kind of interesting how relevant this concept has got. Or I mean, it was relevant then. I mean, fast forward to now about how the lack of human contact, it causes problems, causes issues, whether it's individual, depression and anxiety and these types of things. It's like I need that touch. I think it's also interesting. We had a discussion on our previous episode, again, Peter Gabriel with his song "And Through the Wire." Again, meaning, looking at when I am talking to people, it's through a telephone. You could say today through the air, and no touch, no direct contact and communication. He was concerned about these issues 45 years ago, right? And the fact, how much more relevant they have become. Everything that he's saying here, plays so well in today's world as well, and all in a more conventional kind of sound format.
So it's a good song, and they're not necessarily it's not as complex in terms of subject matter or music as some of as the first two tracks, but very accessible. If if someone who liked So, for example, and wanted to go back, would they'd be pleased to hear a song like this. Do you disagree with that, Sven?
Yeah, this is a song that was on that greatest hits collection that was my entryway to the music of Peter Gabriel. And this was a song, I remember listening to this in my final year of college, and this was an earworm. I remember walking around with this song in my head.
Yeah.
This is kind of the and through the wire of this album.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to, it may not be the most provide the most stimulating fodder for discussion, but this is the song that you can tap your toe to when it is played.
Yeah.
And that's not something you could say for everything that is on this album.
Well, I was just going to say if you look, we're not going to talk about it because it's on side 2, but on side 2 we had a song, "Lay Your Hands on Me," which was so clearly this type of physical contact was on Peter's mind as he was writing these songs.
I've got a little embarrassing thing to share. Embarrassing only that
cool.
This song has an alternate version. And the alternate version was remixed by Robbie Robertson from the band. I believe for a film soundtrack for a movie I never saw. But that version of the song contains an extra verse. You'll if you listen to Sirius XM, the 80s alternative station, they probably play that version of the song.
Mm-hmm.
But the extra verse starts with the line, "Your actions talk as a naked man with nothing up their sleeve." And this is my most embarrassing misheard lyric ever, because if you sing the words "your actions" with a British accent, it sounds a bit like erections. And so, and with the added context of "as a naked man," that seems consistent with that. And then we get to "nothing up their sleeve," and where are we now with that metaphor? So that's my embarrassing misheard lyric that I only corrected less than 24 hours ago in Googling what is the actual lyric of that alternate version of this song.
Well, and I'll tell you, there have been multiple times in preparing for these sideshow podcasts that Mark and I have been doing where I have come to realize that there was a subtle difference in lyrics that I thought I knew going back 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a common a thing when you really start to poke your nose into things. And we're talking about how this is kind of an accessible song, but it still kind of has that edginess, and it wasn't in the clip that we listened to, but there's a kind of a bridge where Peter Gabriel sings, "Pull my chin, stroke my hair, scratch my nose, hug my knees, try drink, food, cigarette, tension will not ease, I tap my fingers, fold my arms, breathe in deep, cross my legs, shrug my shoulders, stretch my back, but nothing seems to please, I need contact."
Mm-hmm.
And so he sort of tightens things up a little bit and kind of, puts a little bit of an edge so he can draw some blood to it. That's not the best way to phrase it, but so he can make his point, how, you can try all sorts of things, but nothing replaces actual contact. And, you mentioned, "Lay Your Hands on Me." They did perform. They performed "Lay Your Hands on Me" when I saw him, and he laid down and allowed himself to be passed around by the crowd, and he got a ways away from the stage, and by the time he made it back to the stage, I mean he was shirtless. I mean, so we're talking about some of the members of the audience were a little presumptuous. He wasn't harmed or mishandled or mistreated by any member of the audience. But I thought it was a very bold act of faith to trust this audience of however many thousand people were at this concert to literally put yourself in their hands. And it showed that Peter Gabriel was willing to do something that most insurance companies would probably tell a rock performer, don't do that, or your insurance policy, your premiums are going to go up if you continue to let these fucking people lay their hands on you. But he did it. He did
the
it.
Performance. He was about the performance.
Yeah, and and when he got back up on the stage, well, here he's got, I mean, he's got no shirt, and because Lay Your Hands on Me, a lot of magnitude of sound in that track, and I mean, it was unlike anything I've ever seen, and so he puts his money where his mouth is, you know, and just to kind of go back to Genesis, I mean, on one of their earliest albums, the album is called Nursery Crime, and it was either their second or their third album. It was either right after from Genesis to Revelation, or Trespass might have come out first. But in any case, Nursery Crime is the name of the album, and the song is called The Musical Box. And at the very end, it's, you know, it's like a 8 or 9 minute track. It's a lengthy track. And at the very end, Peter Gabriel comes back and just, I've been waiting here for so long. And he eventually sings, you know, why don't you touch me, touch me, touch me. And then he goes, now. And it is one of the most plaintive cries for contact that I can think of in kind of rock era music. Mm-hmm. So the human touch is something that's very important to Peter Gabriel. And it's reflected in this song. Moving back into the sinister, or more, I don't know what the right word is, but the final track on side one of Security is called "The Family and the Fishing Net," and for those of us that have been married and gone through that process with a conventional wedding ceremony followed by a social reception, one might think that Peter Gabriel takes a dim view of that process. And while I don't think that's the case, you know, Peter Gabriel is someone who's been married in his life, has had children, and I don't think that's where he's coming from, but he is definitely exploring and pondering the ritualistic aspects of the marriage ceremony, and just to kind of to establish the tone, I got a few clips that we are gonna hear. Let's listen to the first clip, which basically covers the beginning of the song, and then we'll continue our discussion on the other side.
Suffocated by mirrors, stained by dreams, her honey belly pulls the seams, curves are stiff upon the hinge, pale zeros tinge the tiger skin, moist as grass, ripe and heavy as the night, sponges full, well out of sight, all around the conversations I sing on the warm fresh cake.
All right. Well, and again, and there, you know, this clip started about a minute into the song, and the tone is just kind of dark, mysterious, and and doesn't really make direct reference to the wedding ceremony at this time, but, you know, her honey belly pulls the seams, curves are stiff upon the hinge. I think he's referring to the bride in a tightly fit wedding dress. Is what I think he's talking about. What do you think, Sven?
This song I have less of a handle on than anything else on this side. I am there with Peter Gabriel on his strangest of experiments, but this one still kind of weirds me out, this song.
Well, I mean, I look at this when you've got a belly pulling the seams of a wedding dress that is someone who is potentially pregnant while they're being married. In other words, this may not be a marriage of choice, which can explain some of they're talking about the different parts of the ritual, as they're happening, but there's kind of a little kind of the worried father, that's in here. They'll talk about later. They talk about, other aspects of this that are, just not quite right. It's not this happiest, brilliantest of day, right? That is occurring. So I get a sense, especially when you're talking about the family and the fishing net. Fish normally don't like getting caught, right? I mean, there's, when you use language like this. So I get the sense that we're talking about a marriage that is not necessarily one that is fully of choice of all the parties involved, which creates that type of slant that you just feel with what is otherwise normally perceived as a gloriously happy occasion for a family. That's my thoughts.
And so it's just that's the first part of the song. Now I've got another clip, because the song kind of picks up and gets a little more into what's happening here. So let's listen to this next track, and then we'll continue after. All right. Now, when the song, when things start to pick up there, vows of sacrifice, headless chickens, dance in circles. Now, that could be referring to, the headless chickens could be referring to like a voodoo ceremony in Haiti. Mm-hmm. Where that sort of thing, cutting the head off of a chicken is part of what's happening. But, and I don't think that this happened at my wife and my wedding. But when I lived in Milwaukee for a period of time, I was working as a bartender, and I worked up at the Eline Pavilion at the Performing Arts Center and they had weddings and corporate parties and things like that up there. And that could also be talking about the vows of sacrifice. So after the wedding, people are at the reception, and they're dancing around like chickens with their heads cut off because they're in circles doing the hokey pokey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, which is it? Which is it? Voodoo in Haiti, hokey pokey in Milwaukee,
or the chicken dance,
dance. Yeah. I bet. I think one of your weddings, Mark, was the first time your first wedding, the first time I ever did the chicken dance.
There you go. And you haven't gotten much better at it, right? Through the time. I just, I think that he brings in so many little slices of this ritual, and it very well could be that if we look at this, in other cultures, the same notion of marriage or whatever, yeah, we are going to see different things that are, that are brought in. Um, but I mean, either way, there's just this feeling of not quite right that we hear as he talks about each of these things, whether it be the cake, whether it be the vows, whispers in the crowd, these types of things. There's always just a little slash of negativity that seems to be rearing its head as we go through here.
Well, in one of the lyrical verses, and I don't think this is going to be covered in a clip that we're going to listen to, but one of the lyrical verses following the clip that we just listened to is, even as the soft skins tingle, they mingle with the homeless mother who loves the day but lives another that once was hers. The worried father, the long-lost lover, brushes ashes with his broom, rehearses jokes to fly and hover, bursting over the bride and groom. And the talk goes on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now that is definitely referring to to what's going on at a wedding. And most all of the weddings that I've ever attended were happy, joyous occasions, positive. People were looking towards a bright future and stuff like that. But that doesn't change the fact that what you were saying earlier, Mark, is true. That everyone at the wedding has different things going on in their life, and they're not necessarily as happy as the bride and groom, assuming that the bride and groom are happy, and the parents of the bride and the groom are all happy. I don't know. I mean, Sven, amongst us, the three of us, you're the one that hasn't actually gone through a wedding ceremony as the groom. And
this song is not a sales pitch for doing so.
Well, fair enough. I mean, you've been listening to this song for a while, and I mean, you indicated earlier that you don't necessarily have a hard and fast feeling for what this song is about, but what sort of emotions or reactions have you had as you've listened to this song over the years?
I mean, there clearly is the core imagery of the wedding, and then but just all this other dark ritual. I mean, at least it seems that way. I had never thought of the headless chickens as doing the hokey pokey though. But that is a bright sheen on this otherwise pretty dark song.
Well, and I wasn't. I mean, I was being more or less serious when I made that allusion, because I mean the lyrics don't exclude that interpretation. Number one, but on the other side of the coin, as I indicated, I don't recall that the hokey pokey was done at when my wife and I had our reception after our wedding. It may have been. I don't recall that it was, but I do recall being at a corporate party that was held up in this E-Line Ballroom at the Performing Arts Center in Milwaukee. This would have been about 1985. And here's these people who are being rewarded by their benevolent employer for, the making good money for them over the course of the year, and were able to have a party and have free drinks and free food and loosen their ties and get relaxed. And here they're doing the hokey pokey. The band performing at this thing played the hokey pokey, and they looked like they were having a good time. But I recall standing there in my wing-tipped shirt and bow tie and black apron with my hands behind my back, thinking, because I hadn't graduated college at this time. Before I decided to go to law school, my path into the future had yet to be defined, and I recall, what's the reward? I mean, is this what you work for? Is this what you achieve so that you can get a party every year where you can do the hokey pokey? And then I had to remind myself that the hokey pokey is what it's all about. So
That's what it's all about.
that's what it's all about. I guess that is what it's all about. So, but I mean, more seriously, because Peter Gabriel, he saw more in the backdrop behind besides the hokey pokey.
Yep.
I'm sure that wasn't what he was thinking. But the we'll play the last clip, and here this is sort of the last pitch for the sale that Sven wasn't buying, and we'll continue afterwards.
The lifeguards whom the winter saves. Silence falls, the guillotine. All the doors are shut. Nervous hands grip tight the knife in the darkness till the cake is cut. Passed around in little pieces. The body and the flesh. The family and the fishing nets. Another in the The body and the flesh. And the flesh.
All right. Now, if there was ever a jaundiced take on not just the marriage ceremony or the rituals that accompany the two people getting married, whether it's dancing or whatever it might be, but this part of the song really makes it seem like marriage is something that is somehow bad, somehow not good, not a good thing. And I mean, how else do you know? Silence falls the guillotine, all the doors are shut. Nervous hands grip tight the knife in the darkness till the cake is cut and passed around in little pieces, the body and the flesh. It doesn't sound very savory to me. The way that Peter Gabriel's putting it out there doesn't sound very savory to me.
Not at all. And again, you can picture, as people, whether it be their own weddings or weddings that they've attended or whatever, all these different parts, the cutting of the cake. When I see the bride and the groom holding I don't think guillotine, right? That's not what comes to my head. But we're hearing it here, and that can kind of imply, as soon as you cut that cake, the guillotine comes down and life as you knew it is over. You're in the fishing net now. I don't know. Did Peter have a troubled marriage or something, or did he struggle with his in-laws? The old family fishing net seems to be something that concerns him.
As a matter of fact, earlier in our discussion, we were talking about the new producer brought on board to this record, David Lord, who was somebody who lived locally. He was not a neighbor of Peter Gabriel, but in the same town, and he was brought on board, and they were working very closely on this record, and enjoying each other's company. But it turns out that David Lord enjoyed the company of Peter Gabriel's wife even more so.
Oh,
There's a reason that they did not collaborate again after this.
interesting.
And those final lyrics, the family and the fishing net and another in the mesh. And it's sort of like someone's, life has caught you in its net, and you have succumbed to the trap of life, and for someone who is, especially someone who is either going through a problem in their marriage, such as an adulterous affair by your spouse with your producer, and when around the time that Peter Gabriel left Genesis in 1975, there were issues in his marriage. Not necessarily that he wanted to get divorced or that his wife wanted to get divorced, but they had a prematurely born child, and he was spending a lot of time with his band Genesis, and he wanted to devote more time, and I believe that eventually he was divorced. I don't know whether that was the same spouse as was involved with David Lord, but there are people in this world who, through no real fault of their own, have found themselves in an unhealthy marriage, and that needed to result in divorce if everyone was going to be able to live happy lives, and if this song was being recorded around the time when Peter Gabriel was potentially going through a second round of disillusionment with the success of a marriage, it's not because I had to deal with divorce a lot in my work before retirement, and it's a process that happens regularly to good people, and it's unpleasant, and it results. Some are more amicably resolved than others, but and I know people who have had relatively amicable divorces, but it's something that's accompanied with emotional turmoil,
Yeah.
and can create cynicism, and pessimism, and certainly the tone of this song suggests as much. And when he refers to the body and the flesh, Peter Gabriel is the sort of person who, at the end of the day, I think, acknowledges the fact that all humanity, that various frailties are part of being a human being, and that bad things happen to good people, and that mistakes are made, and forgiveness is the best way to respond. But at the moment he was putting this song together, that wasn't his attitude.
Nope, not at all.
This is not this side. The side one of Security does not end on the relative high point of the last album, with a more or less positive expression of affection, and lamenting the fact that we have to settle for a phone call to actual contact. Here, it's almost like he's saying, don't get caught in the trap. Almost.
Yeah, exactly. Not an upbeat end, but the whole album side has been, kind of challenging. I don't mean challenging to listen to. I mean him challenging, these different notions. There's things he's thinking about and wants the listener to think about it, and it's done with some really interesting and different and complex music that goes along with it. So I think it creates not only a good side of music, but some very thought-provoking topics as well as you go along. And if people don't want to have their thoughts provoked and just want to listen to some music, well, this side has it. And if you want to dig a little deeper into it, it's got some things to think about as well.
Well, and I'll tell you that because he performed this song when I saw Peter Gabriel in 1987,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll tell you, it was a fantastic performance, because this song, it starts kind of atmospherically, builds in intensity, and I mean at the very end there, where the song is really picking up, and another in the I mean, he had that whole crowd in the palm of his hand at that moment, because it just kind of built up and went from kind of a moody, atmospheric, almost ambient type piece to something that was almost like rocking out. I specifically recall it from the show as being, wow, that was intense.
Well, an intense concert, I'm sure, an intense album, and certainly an intense side of an album, and a great discussion. And I'd like to thank Sven for joining us. Your insights on both this episode and the previous episode we did on Peter Gabriel were really interesting to listen to. So appreciate you joining, and hope that we'll have a chance to have you on some more episodes to hear what you have to say about the music that you've listened to.
Thank you for the invite. It was fun.
Well,
Awesome.
and I have a funny feeling that this isn't the last we've seen of Sven. And I've already got some ideas. Sven and I had opportunities when we were working together to talk music, and there's fertile soil for Sven episodes as we go on. So yeah, I join in Mark's comments, Sven. We will be talking to you in the meantime, and definitely seeing you again on the sideshow.